Hello everyone, back from the grave again, Calamity here, and today we're going to talk about Ayaka. She's going to be having her rerun banner in the next few days, and I thought I'd make a video about her, and I'm going to talk about everything you need to know about her, from her talents, weapon recommendations, artifacts, how to build those artifact pieces, constellations, team setups, how to play her, all the things you need to know about Ayaka. I'm going to cover it. But before we start, I always would like to point out in this video that hey, if you like Ayaka because you think she's cute, or you like her personality, or you like her playstyle, you know, by all means, go ahead and pull for her. But this is just to help those that are sort of like on the fence, not sure if she's worth pulling for the primogems, and want to just see more than the limited trial runs that Hoyoverse gives us when a character is out. But if you want the short version of this video, TLDW, she is a very, very strong cryo main DPS. She's up there with Ganyu. Very strong single target for sure. So if you're looking for a very solid cryo DPS, look no further. Ayaka is a fantastic option for that. Now with that being said, let's take a look at her talents. We're going to start with the normal attack Kamisato Art Kabuki. Now this is a fairly normal attack talent. There's nothing too fancy about it. Her charge attack though is a little bit unique. Her charge attack is a little bit different compared to other characters. She'll just do a small flurry of sword attacks after a short charge time. Other than that though, normal attacks are pretty standard. Plunging attack, standard stuff. And if you look at the skill attributes, nothing too fancy. Her charge attack does hit 3 times in rapid succession. Right, next up, we have the elemental skill, which has a very, very short and simple explanation here. You summon Blooming Ice to launch nearby opponents, dealing AoE cryo damage. That's pretty much it. It will launch lesser enemies, so think of hilichurls and slimes and things like that will get launched. Obviously, bigger enemies like Ruin Guards or any of the Ruin type enemies, and of course bosses, will not be launched by the skill. Skill attributes, mine's only at level 8, but as you can see, it has a pretty decent skill multiplier, and it does do good damage. Next up, this is not her burst, but Kamisato Art Senho. This is her sprint. So she has an alternate way of sprinting. If you're not familiar with this type of sprinting, Mona has a similar type of sprint where they go underground sort of. Now this used to be kind of clunky and a lot of people didn't like it, and it was a huge deterring factor for Ayaka. You know, in about patch 3.0 I believe, they actually fine-tuned how this feels. So the sprinting for Ayaka feels way more smooth than it does, and you don't get stuck on objects as often as you did before. I would say give it a try, but the trial is in a very flat circular arena, so there's not a lot of objects to try. But if you have Mona, since she has a very similar sprint, you could also try sprinting with her and just to see how smooth it feels. If you don't have either, you're just gonna have to take my word for it. The sprint with Ayaka is just not as bad as it used to be. There are 2 things you need to know about her sprint. She will apply cryo to nearby enemies while she's sprinting, which is actually really nice. And her attacks will be infused with cryo after you sprint. So if you've ever seen Ayaka gameplay, you might see them dip into their sprint form and then burst back right up. Not only are they applying cryo to their opponents if they're trying to get a freeze on, but like it's also to infuse her attacks so that they'd also do cryo with her normal and charge attacks. There's some skill attributes for it. You can see the stamina consumption for it, and the infusion duration lasts for 5 seconds. It's pretty short, which is why you'll see again those Ayaka mains are dipping for their cryo damage bonus. Ayaka's burst. This is the big one. In fact, it's so big I've crowned it. This is one of the best bursts in the game, in my opinion, in terms of just everything, animation, damage, what it does. It's all good. So let's talk about it. So you summon forth a snowstorm with a flawless poise. Is that how you say that? Poise? Unleashing a Frostflake Seki no To that moves forward continuously. Frostflake Seki no To, a storm of whirling icy winds that slashes repeatedly at every enemy it touches, dealing cryo damage. The snowstorm will explode after its duration ends, dealing AoE cryo damage. Now I probably have some gameplay clips playing over Ayaka's face here that are showcasing these abilities that I'm talking about. But what you need to understand about this burst is how strong it is. Seriously, this is one of the strongest bursts in the game. It can also be a bit tricky to use. because what makes it strong is you need the enemy to be stuck. So I probably have some footage of me using it on like a Regis Vine, right? Those are easy because those enemies don't move. They're just in the center, and then when you stun them, they're just flat on the ground, and you can just use the burst and it'll get stuck. If you have a boss that moves around a lot, then it gets a little bit tricky to kind of stick this burst on them, because you want this burst to essentially get stuck on the boss or whatever you're targeting until, you know, the thing dies. That's what makes this so good. It's very similar to like Deluxe, but the thing with Deluxe burst is that his bird will just go through enemies no matter what. The bird doesn't get stuck. It will just pierce through everything. Hers doesn't pierce through enemies. It'll get stuck on whatever it's hitting, which is why it's really, really strong for single target damage. Once you can learn when to use it on certain boss fights, Ayaka's single target damage is very, very strong. Let's take a look at her talents as well, or passive talents, I mean. So the first one we have is called, I'm not even going to try saying that, that's a lot of words. Sanctification, I'll just call it that. So after you use your skill, your elemental skill, your normal and charge attacks will deal 30% increased damage for 6 seconds. Not much to say about it. I mean, her normal and charge attacks aren't the source of her main damage pre C6, but it's a nice thing to have. And then the second passive talent is called Kanten Senmyo Blessing. And this is going to affect your sprint. So whenever you hit an opponent with your sprint and it, you apply cryo, you're going to restore 10 stamina to yourself, which is really nice. And you're going to gain an 18% cryo damage bonus for 10 seconds. Now keep in mind, that 18% cryo damage bonus is going to apply to your skill and to your burst. So it's always a good idea to sprint for just like a quick second right next to your enemies to apply that cryo and get that free 18% cryo damage bonus. And lastly, her other passive talent, which is, kind of whatever. Whenever you're crafting weapon ascension materials, 10% chance to double the product you're crafting. Nice ability there. Albedo also has it. I believe Mona has something similar, but that's going to cover it for her talents. Really, really, really strong kit. Very also easy to use. Very, very easy character to use. Next up, let's talk about weapons. As you can see, I'm using a 4-star Blackcliff's longsword weapon because I am unlucky enough to pull for her signature weapon. Maybe I might try it again during the rerun, who knows. But this is a weapon I highly recommend for free-to-play or low spenders because you can get this weapon from Paimon's Bargains. If you've pulled on any banner, really, you get the Star Glitter, which you can use to exchange for these weapons. I'm not sure what Paimon has this month, but she rotates between the Royal set and the Blackcliff set. So hopefully you can get one of these weapons while her banner's up. If not, you're going to have to wait till April. If you're looking for a free-to-play option and you completely have nothing to give your Ayaka, you could definitely give her I'm going to try my best to pronounce this, Aminoma Kageuchi. I'm sorry, but this is a sword that you can craft in Inazuma. It does have a attack substat, which is, it's okay. And basically it will give you energy after you use your burst, depending on how many these succession seeds you have. So you get these succession seeds whenever you use your skill. And when you use your burst, you will get extra energy for each seed you consume. You can have up to 3. So this is going to help you a lot with your energy recharge needs. Basically allowing you just to go ham on crit rate, or crit damage and attack percentage stats on your artifacts. Going into 5-star options, honestly, they're all good. Even something like an Aquila Favonia is really good for Ayaka because even though she's not doing physical damage, or at least she shouldn't because she can self-infuse herself with cryo, it does have a really high base attack, and it does increase her attack by 20% passively from the weapon's effect. So even a weapon like this is fine for her if you've got limited options here. Primordial Jade Cutter, of course, one of the best swords in the game. No doubt going to be strong on her. You just have to mind that it does have a stat of crit rate, and with the way you build Ayaka, you're actually going to be easily reach the cap on crit rate for sure if you use this weapon. So it's a very strong weapon if you're able to get it. Quick tip on weapon choices is that you want to avoid stuff like Elemental Mastery for Ayaka because she is primarily built in freeze teams. You can build her in a melt team. I'm not saying don't do that, but she primarily is used for freeze. So Elemental Mastery doesn't really do anything for freeze reactions, so keep that in mind. Artifacts. When it comes to artifacts, we're going for the 4-piece Blizzard Strayer set. This is going to be the strongest thing you can get on her. If you don't have access to the Dragon Spine domain yet, you could just do something simple like a Gladiator's Finale and any other 2-piece attack percentage set if that's something you want to go for. Barely starting out, maybe you could just do like 2-piece Gladiators, 2-piece Noblesse Oblige until you get access to Blizzard Strayer, but you definitely want to go for this set. If you're going to try something different though, like a Melt Melt Ayaka, then you do not want the Blizzard Strayer set. But for the most part, if you're just trying to get something on Ayaka and you're just trying to build her normally for now, Blizzard Strayer is the go-to set because it gives her additional cryo damage, and when an enemy is frozen, she basically gets 40% crit rate, which is huge. So when it comes to substats for Ayaka's artifacts, what you want to do is, usually this is the part where I say, you want your crit rate, crit damage, but when it comes to Ayaka, because she's using Blizzard Strayer, because you have cryo resonance, and even if you're using a crit substat weapon in case you are, high chance you're really close to capping your crit rate at 100%, or very, very close to it. So in this case for Ayaka, or most cryo main DPSs, you're gonna want to just focus hard on crit damage. Crit rate, if you get a couple of it on your substats, it's, it's not bad. But you definitely just want to go more in favor of crit damage, followed by attack percentage, and then energy recharge. And then I would put crit rate definitely has a much lower priority, right next to like flat attack. Next up, let's take a look at her constellations, which are very, very good. So for those of you that already have an Ayaka, and if you're wondering about, should you invest more? If you absolutely love this character and you just want to get more constellations for her, feel free. But also, you're going to get tons more damage and power on your Ayaka from each constellation, except maybe like the 5th one. So let's talk about the C1. And this is going to make Ayaka's normal and charge attacks reduce the cooldown of her burst. Sorry, her skill. I meant her skill, not her burst. That would be too OP. Reduce the cooldown of her skill by 0.3 seconds every 0.1 second. This is going to make those energy requirements we were talking about even less so, since you'll be able to just constantly cast your elemental skill more often for those sweet energy particles. If you thought her burst wasn't strong enough, now it's going to add 2 smaller versions of it on the sides of your burst. I can't showcase what this looks like, unfortunately, because as you can see, I don't have a C2 Ayaka, but it just makes your burst even wider. So if you're going against really fat targets and they eat the main whirlwind and then the 2 smaller ones on the side, you're going to be doing tons and tons of damage already on top of an already strong burst. C3 is going to add +3 skill level to your burst, which, hey, you're just adding more damage to one of the best bursts in the game. That's crazy. This one allows your burst to reduce enemies' defense by 30% for 6 seconds, which should be all the time as long as it's hitting. Now keep in mind, this is also going to increase the damage of your skill and your normal attacks, because when she's casting her burst and it's on the field, you have complete control over Ayaka. You can, sprint in and do normal attacks, and you can do your elemental skill, and it's going to do increased damage because of this constellation. So this is overall just a huge 30% increase in damage for your Ayaka. Now this is probably the weakest constellation, C5, because it's just +3 to her skill, but her skill is actually pretty decent in doing damage, so it's not bad. It's just when you have so many broken constellations, this one's not the most exciting. Next up, we have Dance of the Suigetsu, which is going to grant Ayaka the buff called the Usuharahi Buto every 10 seconds, increasing her charge attack damage by just about 300%. You're gonna see like a big spike in damage when you use her flurry of charge attacks once every 10 seconds. Just keep that in mind. This is where you would buff her with someone like Shenna, who buffs cryo damage immensely. Definitely a broken constellation in a different way, as it allows Ayaka to do insane amounts of damage with her charge attacks. Because right now, even before you get this constellation, her charge attacks should like do okay damage. It's nothing like crazy. But when you get Constellation 6, that small little buff is what turns her charge attacks into like Ganyu levels of damage here, and it's really, really strong. When it comes to team comps, this is probably one of Ayaka's very few weaknesses, in that she doesn't have too many team comp choices, especially as a low spender or a free-to-play player, but most of Ayaka's team comps revolve around freeze. Some sort of team comp, it doesn't have to be this exact one you see before you. You can use Barbara if you don't have Mona or Kokomi, and then maybe swap out Diona for Shenhe or Rosaria for more damage. If you don't have Kazuha, then you can use Venti is actually an option for her because her burst will still hit enemies in his burst if they're lifted up. Sucrose is okay, again, if you don't have anyone else to use, but it's just that Sucrose gives a buff for elemental mastery, which again doesn't really benefit freeze, so that's why it's preferred to use Kazuha or Venti if you have them instead. Yeah, you can feel free to mess around and experiment with some sort of freeze team that you like the most, or you know, whatever fits whatever characters you have, and I'm sure it's gonna do fine. Honestly, even though she's only limited to freeze teams, she can flex her team members quite a bit. Unfortunately, since she is cryo, she doesn't have any sort of synergy with Dedro units, unfortunately, at least at the time of recording. Who knows, they could change that in the future, but for the most part, your team with Ayaka is going to look something like this. Okay, and lastly, before we head out for this video, I just like to showcase, I always like to use this domain because it's just a bunch of enemies in it, but we're just going to use this domain as a showcase of Ayaka's combat abilities, and you can see what a rotation looks like with her. Now you can see how the burst kind of got stuck on that wolf and did a ton of damage to it. That's something you gotta definitely master as an Ayaka main, because the auto-targeting, especially when you're in a fight like this, can mess you up. And it's super annoying when she aims her ult in the wrong direction. That's a bit unfortunate there because the wolf went through it, so we missed a ton of damage with the burst there. That's okay, this is the last guy. We'll just wrap it up here. And that's a wrap. Hopefully I did a good job of showcasing Ayaka in the domain. I do my best on these fights. As I said at the beginning of the video, she is a very strong DPS. The hardest thing, again, I'm going to just repeat this, is just getting her burst in the right spot at the right time. You can see that I got a couple of good bursts in there, but I totally missed one because the wolf just went through it. And that was something I needed just to wait a bit. And then if I used my ult just a couple seconds later after that attack, it would have been much better. If there's anything you'd like to know about Ayaka that you feel like I missed, or questions you have about her, building her, stuff like that, feel free to leave a comment down below. I'll do my best to try to answer it. That's going to wrap it up for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you like the content, and I'll see you in the next one.